welcome back. If you are unfamiliar with my channel, I do a lot of bookish content. Recently, I've been delving more into Greek myths and legends and doing mini-series related to various topics. This video in particular is the second part of a 5-part series where we go over the different races of humanity discussed in the Greek creation mythology. So the first video we had talked about the golden race. These are different races or different ages of humanity as described in the, what is it called? Works and Days, which is a series of poems by the poet Hesiod. So like I mentioned earlier, we've already done a video on the golden race, which was during the reign of Cronus. So the second age of man, or the second race, would be the silver race. It was the generation that had everything and lost it, which I would argue would be the same for the golden race, right? Like they had everything. They were secure, they were safe. Now we have the silver race. But what hallmarks their existence is the wasted potential. So after the peaceful golden race came to an end, Zeus created a new generation of humans. So kind of like what I had said in the golden race video, what I suspect happened, because there's not a whole lot really specified out there on the different races. Like, I feel like either they're not really mentioned on purpose because they're not viewed as important, or they're just assumed to be known. And I didn't even realize that these were a thing, that the different races were part of the creation myth, which is why I found it so interesting that a lot of the books that I had didn't really go into detail on them. So the silver race is the second generation created by Zeus. And at first glance, they seem impressive. They were physically stronger, they were larger than the ones in the golden race. So while they possessed strength, they lacked wisdom. One of the most usual details about the silver race is how incredibly long their childhood lasted. That's not good. Hesiod tells us they remained children for nearly 100 years. So if you think about, I wonder what they determine as childhood though. So living under the care of their mother. So their mothers had to raise them for 100 years before they could become self-sufficient, is what I'm understanding from this. This wasn't meant to suggest they were simply slow to mature physically. Many scholars believe it symbolized emotional and spiritual immaturity. So even though they were physically grown, they physically looked like adults, right? They physically were strong enough to be considered adults. They lacked the emotional, spiritual maturity to function like adults, is what I've gathered from this. Even after all that time, they never truly learned humility, gratitude, or self-control. So these are just wild, untamed adults existing on impulse. Once they finally reached adulthood, so after 100 years, their lives were surprisingly short. Their long childhoods were followed by brief adult lives, almost as though all that time had been squandered instead of spent preparing to become wise and responsible. Unlike the golden race, who lived peacefully alongside nature and honored the divine order, the silver race became arrogant, which I can see that happening. Like, you'll see people even now where their immaturity makes them behave in a way that they act like they think they know it all, hence the arrogance, right? So they think they know it all, they act like they know it all, but they don't. So they're ignorant and they come off as rude and disrespectful. So I imagine that this is what they are behaving like as adults, right? So this is them during their short adult lifespan behaving as rude know-it-alls that don't know anything. They ignored the gods, refused to offer sacrifices, and acted as though they no longer needed divine guidance. That's a big no-no, right? If like that's going to make them angry. To modern audiences, refusing to worship the gods might not seem like a terrible offense, but in ancient Greece, sacrifices were simply religious rituals. They represented respect, gratitude, and an acknowledgement that humans were not the highest power in the universe. Maintaining that relationship with the gods was believed to help preserve balance between heaven and earth. The Silver Race rejected that balance. Their pride grew into defiance rather than living with gratitude, and they acted as if they deserved everything they had. Eventually, Zeus decided enough was enough, and he destroyed the entire race. Unlike the Golden Race, who became honored guardian spirits watching over humanity. So that's interesting. So even though Zeus did not create the golden race of humans, he respected their afterlife. He respected their being as important and gave them a secondary purpose in his new world, right? Because Zeus took over. He allowed that race who was just and right and respectful to further exist in his new world. Sounds like the silver race did not get the same outcome. Let's see what they got. They received a quieter fate. Hesiod says they became blessed mortals beneath the earth. They were given some honor after death, but they never achieved the revered status of the golden race. So they just became spirits underneath the earth, like hidden away. And just hide them away. Hide them. Their story marks the first great decline in humanity. The golden race had shown what humans could be when they lived with generosity, peace, and respect. And now the silver race demonstrated how quickly those ideals could disappear when pride replaced them. When pride replaced humility. I like that. So I guess the biggest takeaway is that even though the silver race was physically superior to the golden race because they had significant amount of morality flaws and like we had said earlier, their ignorance of the race of that generation of people. Greek mythology often teaches that character, not power, is what determines a person's legacy. I think that even applies to today. That definitely applies to today. People are going to remember how you treated other people and not so much about all the other things we like to boast about. The Silver Race also introduces one of the central themes of Hesiod's 5 ages. Each generation faces a choice. Will it live with justice, gratitude, and humility, or will pride and selfishness slowly unravel society? So then after that, so it sounds like Zeus just said, oh, this was a fluke. Not really, this was a complete failure. This generation is not doing, I don't, Zeus is like, I'm done with this, and just got rid of them and hid them away, right? The so we got through the golden race, we just went through the silver race. Now we're gonna go to the bronze race and see what that's all about. Again, if you're interested in anything to do with this channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Remember, have fun and be safe. See you next time.